This meeting is now being recorded.
Okay, hi everybody. We will start the webinar right now. Welcome to the Office of Information Management and Analysis Brown Bag webinar series. The webinar will be strictly 30 minutes event for both presentation and questions and answers. We'd like to remind you that OIMA Brown Bag webinar will be held every month. The next webinar will be on Wednesday, December 29th. Today's seminar is about bioassessment, and the speaker is Dr. Andrew Rees. Andrew earned a doctorate in entomology from UC Davis in 2000 and has been working with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife Aquatic Bioassessment Lab for 16 years. His primary interests have been the development of biological indicators and their application to statewide and regional stream condition assessments. Other interests include development of tools to improve causal assessment, such as stressor-specific tolerance values, development of better data management tools, and expanding bioassessment into non-perennial streams. With this brief introduction, I'll pass to the phone line to Andy to start his presentation. So Andy, you can go ahead and start your presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dawit, for that introduction. First of all, can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, we're hearing you good here.
Okay, sounds fine. Well, greetings and welcome to everyone attending. This webinar is actually a repeat of a talk I gave at the first Swamp Science Symposium back in June. So for any of you who saw the talk then and feel like you're already familiar with this material, I just want to give you fair warning that this may be old news to you. I certainly don't want to discourage anyone from listening in, but I just want to be clear that some of you may have seen this presentation before. In the overview portion of my talk, I'm going to focus on benthic macroinvertebrates, or BMIs, for bones, in wadable streams and rivers. I won't say anything about fish or algae, although those latter groups are often used in bioassessment, especially algae. But the reason I'm focusing on BMIs today is that they've been more fairly developed as indicators of statewide ecological condition than other types of indicator. And that's especially true in wadable streams as compared to other freshwater habitats. That's not to say that no progress has been made with other indicators or in other habitat types, but I have a limited amount of time to summarize a program that's been growing and maturing for more than 20 years now. And I'm an entomologist, so admit that I have my biases. In the second part of the talk, I'll describe how multiple indicators can be used together to produce a more comprehensive assessment of ecological condition in streams than with any single indicator alone. Okay, so what is bioassessment? Simply put, it's an evaluation of condition or health of a water body based on the organisms living within it. Bioassessment involves surveying the types and numbers of different organisms present in a water body and comparing those results to established benchmarks of biological health. Traditional stream monitoring focused on measures of individual chemicals at a single point in time, but living organisms are exposed to multiple stressors over time, such as multiple chemicals or other stressor types like flow alteration, habitat alteration. So their response gives us an integrated picture of overall stream condition. We started with BMIs because they're diverse and abundant. You can find from dozens to more than 100 BMI species at any given site. There are often thousands of individuals per square meter on a stream bottom. And they also have unique preferences for different microhabitats, not just in terms of natural physical settings, but they also have different sensitivities to pollutants, sedimentation, to flow alteration, and also they're fairly well known taxonomically. So keys exist to identify BMIs, the genus if not species in some cases. So why bioassessment? Streams and rivers provide many benefits to humans. They give us fresh drinking water, they give us places to fish, they give us places to swim, and they support an endlessly fascinating array of natural and native wildlife, from the tiniest brittle beetle to salmonids that spend 5 years of their life in the ocean and then come back to fresh water to spawn. So in recognition of and in order to protect those ecological services, Congress in 1972 passed the Clean Water Act to restore and maintain the chemical, physical, and biological integrity of the nation's waters. But in order to restore and maintain biological integrity, we have to be able to measure and assess it, which is actually really challenging, but nonetheless is fundamental to the core mission of aquatic resource protection. So for the remainder of this overview, I'm going to briefly describe 3 key components of how we measure and assess biological integrity. The first is standardized field and lab methods, including other infrastructure components like data management and quality assurance. The second is the reference condition monitoring program, or the RCMP. Reference conditions allow us to set benchmarks or expectations and are really the core of building interpretive indices for bioassessment data. And then I'll describe the Perennial Streams Assessment, or PSA, which is our statewide survey that allows us to estimate the biological condition of all wadable stream lengths in California. The first key component of our program is standard field and lab methods. So at each bioassessment site, we sample biological, chemical, and physical habitat indicators. Biological indicators are benthic macroinvertebrates, diatoms, and non-diatom algae, or also known as soft algae. We measure a number of chemical indicators, including nutrients, total suspended solids, etc. And we measure a number of physical habitat indicators, including riparian vegetation complexity, substrate composition, local riparian disturbance, just to name a few. All of these indicators are sampled or measured from standardized sampling reach divided into equally spaced transects. And what this means is that every site is sampled systematically and with equal and consistent effort, so we can compare sites from all around the state. In the lab, we have standard methods for both BMIs and algae, for washing and preparing the samples for processing, for subsampling the original total sample into the final portion that actually gets identified by taxonomists. We have standard levels of taxonomic effort. So, for example, which taxa can you successfully to identify the species, which taxa are better to lead a genus, and we have guidance on what's the best taxonomic literature for identification of different groups. These procedures are all pretty different between BMIs and algae, but the result is the same, which is data that are produced with consistent standards so that, again, we can compare sites from all around the state. These methods are well supported and well documented by standard operating procedures. They're well supported by control measures, quality control measures. For example, we do external QC where an independent taxonomist re-identifies all of the specimens from a certain percentage of samples each project. We do field audits and calibrations to make sure the field crews are completing the protocols correctly and consistently. And the methods are well supported by online resources, such as video modules that demonstrate the field protocol. We have photographic libraries of BMIs and algae to help with identifications. Okay, the second key component of our bioassessment program is the Reference Condition Monitoring Program, CMP. Reference sites are healthy stream reaches that define a benchmark of expected biological, chemical, and physical conditions when human disturbance in the environment is absent or minimal. This benchmark, known as the reference condition, is the foundation of any bioassessment program for several reasons. It sets the standard for evaluating results from compliance and ambient monitoring. It provides meaningful objectives for stream restoration. It establishes a framework for protecting our healthy streams and rivers, and it provides a basis for assessing potential effects of climate change on streams and rivers. Over the last 15 years or so, thousands of sites have been sampled all across the state by various regional, state, and federal programs. We've screened well over 2,000 of these pre-existing sites to see if they qualify as reference sites. We mostly use land use characteristics calculated from remote sensing data to screen candidate reference sites. So, for example, to qualify as reference, a site has to have less than 3% urban land in its upstream watershed. It has to have less than 2 kilometers of roads per kilometer squared in the watershed. It can't have any producer mines within 5 kilometers upstream. And we also measure whether or not how much human activity was present in the riparian zone as measured by the field crews. So that is a type of local screen that we apply to determine if sites pass as reference. And this is just a handful of examples. There's a large suite of measures that sites have to pass in order to qualify as reference. In addition to screening these pre-existing sites, we've also targeted high-quality sites to improve our geographic coverage and our environmental coverage of the diverse physiography across California. And the result is that we have a pool of well over 600 reference sites that together represent California's diverse physical settings, physical stream settings. And actually that number is a little outdated now. We have upwards of 700 sites in our reference pool to date. We took those 600 reference sites and we used them to build the California Stream Condition Index, or the CSPI. The CSPI is a statewide biological scoring tool that translates complex data about BMIs found living in a stream into an overall measure of stream health. So the CSPI indicates whether and to what degree a stream is altered from a healthy state. And the reason it was important for our reference pool to capture the diverse stream types across California is because streams vary naturally in the types of organisms that live there. And we didn't want to confuse that natural variation with human-caused disturbance. So I'm going to use my cursor. Hopefully you guys can, to kind of guide you through this slide, hopefully you guys can see it. We use a set of natural environmental predictors, things like elevation, climate, geology, watershed size. And we use statistical models to make site-specific predictions of what species and ecological attributes we should see at a stream if it's in a healthy state. Then the site gets sampled, the organisms get identified in the lab, and the CSPI score is a measure of how well a site's observed condition matches its predicted or expected condition based on our model. Greater deviations from this expectation indicate a greater likelihood of degradation. So the CSPI was calibrated so that the mean score at reference sites is 1. Scores range from 0, which means highly degraded, to 1 or even greater than 1 if a site is equal to reference or even better than we expected. So if you have a loss of taxonomic completeness or a loss of any of these measures of ecological structure and function, you're more likely to get a lowered CSPI score that reflects that loss of species richness or ecological integrity. The CSPI does respond to human activity, so sites with high amounts of human activity in the watershed, things like lots of urbanization or lots of road density, intensive agriculture, or all of the above, tend to have much lower CSPI scores than reference sites. We use the distribution of scores at reference sites to define condition categories for all sites. Again, the CSPI was calibrated so the mean score at reference sites is 1, but we used the 30th percent reference sites to define the boundary between good and fair, or between likely intact and possibly altered. So if you score as good as or better than the 30th percentile of reference site, that site is considered to be in good or likely intact condition. By contrast, if the site scores as bad as or worse than the first percentile of reference sites, we consider it to be in very poor condition or very likely altered condition. Okay, the third key component of our bioassessment program is the perennial streams assessment, PSA. The PSA is our statewide survey where sampling sites are selected according to a probability or randomized survey design. In these designs, each random site represents a known portion of total stream length. That is, each site has a statistical weight. These surveys permit assessment of the entire resource of interest with relatively limited sampling effort, and they work similarly to political or opinion polls, which may not be the best analogy in this post-election season. So the PSA allows us to provide objective answers to several core questions with known statistical precision. What is the biological condition of California streams? Is condition getting better or worse? How does condition differ among streams draining agricultural, urban, and forested watersheds? And what chemical and physical stressors have the strongest association with biological condition? The most recent analysis of PSA data was based on more than 1,300 sites sampled between 2000 and 2012. We used the CSPI as our scoring tool. And so in this map and in the regional pies, the green dots and the green pie slices are sites that were in good condition. The yellow dots and yellow pie slices are sites that were in fair condition. Orange dots and orange slices are sites in poor condition, and red dots, red slices were sites in very poor condition. And on average, statewide, we found that nearly half of the stream length in the state was in good or likely intact biological condition. About a third of sites were in either poor or very poor condition, and about a quarter of sites were in fair condition. But those results varied regionally. So, for example, in the North Coast and Sierra, more than half of stream length was estimated to be in good biological condition. By contrast, in the Central Coast and South Coast, a little more than half of stream length was estimated to be in poor or very poor condition. And then, of course, in the Valley, there were very few sites in good condition, and most of the stream length in the Central Valley was estimated to be in very poor condition. When we looked at stream condition according to upstream land use, okay, so in the box plots at the bottom, the y-axis in these graphs, or bar charts, not box plots, sorry, The y-axis in these graphs is percentage of stream length, and the color coding of the bars is the same as in the previous pie chart. But anyway, we found that streams in agricultural or urban-dominated watersheds were mostly in poor condition. Streams in forested watersheds were mostly in good condition. And then streams with a mixture of land use and land cover in the upstream watershed were more variable in condition. And finally, we were able to calculate relative risk for a suite of stressors we measure as part of these surveys, where relative risk is the increased risk or chance of biological impairment when stressors exceed some critical threshold. And in the interest of time, I'm not really going to go into the methodology I used to define stressor threshold exceedances, but I'd be happy to answer any questions about that offline. But for example, an exceedance of our threshold for total phosphorus, the tallest bar in the middle of the chart, poses a nearly threefold increase in the risk of associated biological impairment. An exceedance of our threshold for our riparian disturbance index, also known as W1 Hall, poses more than a 2.5-fold increase in the likelihood of associated biological impairment. And so, relative risk differs among the different stressor types, but it gives us an indication of how likely we are to biological impairment when these thresholds are exceeded. Okay, so that was a really brief overview of just the key elements of our bioassessment programs. And there's a host of other topics that I wish I had a lot more time to talk about, but I'm just going to briefly include, sort of in closing to my overview, a few key points. The first is that the scope and robust design of our program has attracted a lot of outside investment and collaboration from many non-swamp entities. A few examples of the U.S. Forest Service. We're working with them on a survey of the Sierra Nevada. We've worked with the USGS and SWRCB in Colorado State on modeling ecohydrology. We're working with private timberlands, which is a huge advance in that it's filling in a previous gap in our data sets. And we've worked recently with the Nature Conservancy on mapping aquatic biodiversity across the state and developing a freshwater conservation blueprint. I also want to point out that the distribution of biological and stressor values from both PSA and RCMP provide a complete context for interpreting data from targeted sites. It puts results from site-specific projects into a regional perspective and helps set meaningful and objective restoration targets. And finally, even though I focused on wadable streams, we have moved and are moving into other types of habitats such as depressional wetlands and non-perennial streams. Okay, so part 2 of my talk is about using biological and habitat indices together for bioassessment of California streams. In the overview, I described how BMIs are powerful indicators of stream health because of their integrated response to multiple stressors over time and space. However, other assemblages, like fish or algae, often respond differently to various stressors and over different time scales. So one of the primary long-term goals of SWAMP's bioassessment program has been to develop multiple indices of stream condition so that results from different assemblages can be used in conjunction to produce more complete and rigorous assessments of stream conditions than provided by any single assemblage alone. And what I mean by that is when you have multiple assemblages that are all in agreement about condition, our inference of human-caused alteration to the system or lack thereof is strengthened. By contrast, where multiple assemblages are in disagreement, it might be possible to take advantage of their different sensitivities to elucidate the effect of different stressors. The indices I used in these multiplicator multi-indicator analyses were the CSPI, based on benthic macroinvertebrates, the H20 algae index, which is a hybrid algae index based on both diatoms and soft algae in conjunction, and the California Rapid Assessment Method, or CRAM, which is an index not based on a particular taxonomic assemblage, but instead combines in-stream and riparian measures to indicate overall condition of habitat. The first step of these analyses was to compare performance characteristics of H20 and CRAM with performance characteristics of CSPI, namely bias, precision, sensitivity, and responsiveness. The goal of these performance analyses was to evaluate whether cases of disagreement among indices might indicate moderate levels of stress, to which some indices have responded but not others, or whether disagreement among indices was more likely to be just noise due to poor performance in one or more index. And the reason these preliminary performance analyses were important is because the index was developed for use in southern coastal California, so it was important to evaluate performance statewide because I was using statewide data sets in these analyses.
Excuse me, Andy.
Yeah.
You have about 3 or 4 minutes to complete. If you can speed up a little bit so that people could have time for questioning.
Seriously? Wow, that went quick. Okay. I'll try to cut to the chase here. Sorry, I didn't realize I was going over.
Yes.
Okay, so H20 and CRAM performed pretty well on a statewide scale, so I felt comfortable using them all together. In a nutshell, so there was full agreement between all 3 indicators at more than half of sites, and that was highly significant in a chi-squared goodness of fit test. In streams, in the 159 streams where all 3 indices indicated impairment, most of those were urban sites with high levels of human activity. At sites where all 3 indices agreed that there was no impairment, they were mostly forested or mixed upstream land use. Many of them were referenced, and very few of them were high activity. And then where there was disagreement among the indices, it was kind of a mixed bag of upstream land use and activity levels. If we look at just the 284 sites where there was disagreement, at the 69 sites where CSPI was degraded but H20 was not, 30 of those sites had only PHAB exceedances, whereas only 5 of them had chemistry-only exceedances. If we looked at the sites where H20 was degraded but CSPI was not, 30 of those sites had chemistry-only exceedances, whereas only 14 of them had PHAB-only exceedances. So these categorical differences seem to indicate that CSPI was more sensitive to physical habitat impairment. H20 was more sensitive to chemistry impairment. So as a follow-up to that, I regressed CSPI, CRAM, and H20 scores against the first principal component axis for 8 different chemistry variables and 4 different PHAB variables, where the first PCA component is a synthetic or composite variable that represents the strongest covariation among the individual variables. And I found that H20 had a much tighter response to the chemical PCA than did CSPI or CRAM. By contrast, I found that CSPI and CRAM had a much tighter response to the PHAB PCA than did H20. So this supported the results from the categorical analyses and seems to indicate that H20 is more responsive to chemical stressors and CSPI and CRAM are more responsive to physical habitat stressors. And so I'll skip the regional patterns so we can get to questions. But the main conclusion was that, again, where multiple assemblages are all in agreement, and they often agree, our inference of human-caused alteration or lack thereof is strengthened. And when they're in disagreement, the different sensitivities of the different indices can potentially help us diagnose different causes of degradation. So sorry to have to speed that up so quickly at the end. I lost track of time.
Yeah, your time is over. So you can go ahead and unmute the participants.
All guests have been unmuted.
Yeah. So,
all guests have been muted.
You don't have any questions from the...
No,
if there is any question from here, you can go ahead and
let me find
ask him. He's close. His number is 606.
Yeah, I know. 606.
You still can listen if you have questions, I think.
Yeah, you'll just have to wait.
From the room. So can you try unmuting them all one more time, just in case?
All guests have been unmuted.
Okay.
All guests have been muted.
So you don't have anything in the chat? No questions?
No.
Okay, I think we will call it, we should adjourn, I believe, because people on the phone cannot ask questions.
I got him. I got him.
Okay, let's try one more time.
Do you want to announce that people could type in questions on chat?
Yeah, it was announced before.
Okay, Andy, can you speak?
I think so.
Okay, good. We can hear you now. So, are there any questions in the room?
Or the phone? The phone.
You used to regress the data that you review.
Get closer.
Hey, Andrew, I was going to ask you what program we're using. I know USGS uses R package and R Studio. Is that what you were using to regress the data?
I did the regressions between
The regression
bug
you were just showing
versus the PSA components. I did that in SysStat.
Oh, okay. I was just curious because USGS is using a data set through R package, and it's become a part of open source data. So I'm just wondering if that's part of the integration process for you guys. Sounds like you guys have collaborated with a lot of groups.
We definitely have, and we use R a lot. I use R not daily, but at least weekly. All of our statewide estimates are done in R through a package called SPSWRCB, to estimate the overall condition of total stream length. That's all done in R. But a lot of those simple analyses, like simple, bivariate regressions, I'll just do those in SysStat.
The reason why I was asking is because what you guys are doing is very similar to something going on right now called the Water Data Challenge. That's about using open source water data sets, and it's going on through the Integrated Water Management, IRWM. So it might be good to collaborate with them on some of your guys' ambitions. Sorry about that. I know that.
I agree.
Yeah, okay, I think we have to adjourn the webinar. Thank you, Andy, and thank you for all participants. The next webinar will be in December 29th. Okay, thank you all.
Thank you, everybody, for listening.
Okay.
The host has left the meeting. So at this time, the meeting will come to an end. Thank you, and goodbye.